Okay, good morning everyone. So I am going to discuss in two lectures what is called the singular value decomposition. This is for rectangular matrices. Okay, let me first state what the result is. So we will work with real matrices. So let A be a real matrix. Okay. By this we mean the space of m by n real matrices. So A is a real matrix of size n by n. Then there exist orthogonal matrices U and V such that A can be factorized as U times a diagonal matrix times transpose of V, where this is an m by n matrix, and this is n by n matrix, and this is an m by n matrix. Okay. So sigma will look like, it's a diagonal matrix, so sigma 1, sigma 2, etc. Right, and there will be zeros there. So if A is a square matrix, then sigma will be a square matrix, and there will be n values, sigma 1, sigma 2, sigma n. Otherwise we take the minimum of m and n, and we will have that many sigma i's here. These sigma i's, they are called, so these sigma 1, sigma 2, etc. They are called the singular values of A, and the matrices U and V, these are orthogonal matrices, and we write them as column in terms of column vectors. They can be written in terms of column vectors. So U, this is an m by m orthogonal matrix. So we write the column vectors U, U1, U2, Un. Okay, these are m column vectors, and similarly we write V as V1, V2, and Vn. These are again column vectors. This is n by n. These vectors, these U1 up to Um, these are called left singular vectors. And the VI's, these are called right singular vectors. And the sigma i's, they are non-negative. All the sigma i's are non-negative. Okay, so this is true for any rectangular real matrix, and similar statement will be true for any complex matrix, but I will not go into that part. Okay. Yeah. So it is decomposing a matrix as product of very nice matrices. Orthogonal matrices, we will see they are very nice matrices. Okay, and this is a diagonal matrix. It's a rectangular matrix, it's a diagonal matrix. The diagonal entries are non-negative. The other entries are 0. Okay, and U is orthogonal matrix. This is another orthogonal matrix. Yeah, so my any matrix is decomposed as a product of two orthogonal matrices and one diagonal matrix. This is the statement, and this is the yeah. So suppose I have a 2 by 3 matrix, then the meaning of sigma will be sigma 1, sigma 2, like this. So we start with 1 1 entry, 2 2 entry, 3 3 entries. So a rectangular matrix is diagonal matrix if it's I entry, the entry in ith row and ith column can be non-zero, but other entries are 0. Then we say a rectangular matrix is a diagonal matrix. Yeah, we will come to that. These are names. These column vectors have names. This U is sitting on the left. So column vectors of U, we say they are left singular vectors, and column vectors of V, they are called right singular vectors. And singular values are in this diagonal matrix. Okay. So any rectangular matrix, real rectangular matrix, can be factorized like this. Yeah, this is a very general statement. There are no assumptions on the matrix. It could be a complex matrix. Then these orthogonal matrices will be replaced by what are called unitary matrices. Yeah, and sigma, the nature of sigma will still be the same. It will be a diagonal matrix where the diagonal entries are non-negative real numbers. Okay, fine. It has lots of consequences. You will see that it gives, it virtually gives all the information about A. Okay. Yeah, so it involves orthogonal matrices. So I will today discuss a little bit about orthogonal matrices, and we also need to know what are called positive definite matrices. Okay, and we need to have some understanding about some subspaces which are naturally associated with a rectangular matrix. Okay, this rectangular matrix gives rise to a linear transformation, and that linear transformation has its kernel, it has its image. Yeah, and there are two other subspaces which Professor Harish Pillai talked about. So there are 4 fundamental subspaces associated with a matrix. I will recall these things first, then discuss some basic facts about orthogonal matrices, and then look at positive definite and positive semi-definite matrices, and then we move into this, and then we will do applications. So that is the plan. Okay, so the plan, I will discuss 4 fundamental subspaces associated to A. Okay. And then I'll recall some basic facts about orthogonal matrices. And then I'll discuss positive definite matrices and their eigenvalues. So this is the plan for today, and if I have time, I will start the discussion on singular value decomposition, and in the lecture tomorrow's lecture, I will do applications of singular value decomposition. Okay. Yeah, this is the plan. So let us first begin with the 4 fundamental subspaces. For A. So A is an m by n matrix, and therefore this gives rise to a linear transformation which we denote by TA. So TA is a map from this n-dimensional real vector space to m-dimensional real vector space, and it maps a vector u. Think of u as a column vector and take it to AU. This is the image of this linear transformation. Yeah. So the kernel of this linear transformation, this is all u in Rn such that TAU, which is equal to AU, is equal to 0. And this is also called the null space of the matrix A, and we denote this by n of A. Yeah, so null space of this matrix or the kernel of this linear transformation, they are one and the same, and this consists of solutions to this homogeneous system of linear equations. A is an m by n matrix, so there are m equations here and there are n unknowns. Yeah, u is a vector in Rn, so it has n components. Yeah, these are the unknown quantities, and we want to know what are those u's so that AU equal to 0. This is a system of m linear equations in n unknowns, and that is the null space of this matrix. Yeah, this is the first space, and then the second space. So this is the first space. The second space, okay, the second space is the row space of A. This is the linear span of the row vectors. So I will denote row vectors. There it is a m by n matrix. So how many row vectors are there? M row vectors. And where do they live? They live inside Rn. So row vectors live inside Rn, and column vectors, when you map it to AU, yeah, then we get vectors in Rm, but these are linear combinations of column vectors of A. Okay, so column vectors have m components, so all the common column vectors, which are n of them, they are inside m dimensional space. Okay, so the row space is the linear span of the row vectors of A, and this is a subspace of Rn, and we denote this by R of A. Yeah. What is the connection between null space of A and the row space of A? Do you see an obvious connection between null space of A and row space of A? The null space consists of vectors A so that AU is 0. Yeah. Yeah. Null space of A is all vectors in Rn so that AU equal to 0. But you see, I write A in terms of row vectors A1, A2, AN. These are the row vectors, and then I can multiply with this column vector UN. Okay, and this is 0. So how do we multiply this matrix with this? Take A1, this row vector, and take the dot product with this column vector. Yeah. So this is equal to A1 dot U, where U is this vector. Then second entry in AU is A2 dot U and AM dot U. And this is 0. That means A1 dot U is 0, A2 dot U is 0, AN dot. So U, this vector which is in the null space, is perpendicular to all the row vectors. Yeah. So AU equal to 0 if and only if U is perpendicular to every row vector and conversely, suppose I take a vector which is perpendicular to all the row vectors, then this calculation shows that that vector will be in the null space. So if a vector is perpendicular to the row vectors, it will be perpendicular to the linear combination of these row vectors also. If I have a vector which is perpendicular to a bunch of vectors, I can take linear combination of those, and that is also perpendicular to U. Yeah. So that means U, which is in the null space, is perpendicular to every vector in the row space. And conversely, any vector which is perpendicular to the subspace spanned by the row vectors is going to be in the null space. So that is the connection between the row space and the null space. So therefore the null space of A is perpendicular to the row space of E. So let us first define in general definition. Suppose V is a subspace of Rn. This is a subspace. Okay. Then V perpendicular or V perp is set of all vectors in Rn, so that U dot V is 0 for all V in Rn. Yeah, suppose this V is one-dimensional subspace. Pardon? V, right? Yeah, not Rn. Yeah, thank you. So the vectors in V perp are perpendicular to every vector in V. So suppose V was a one-dimensional subspace. One-dimensional subspace is a line passing through origin. Yeah. So suppose this was in three-dimensional space, then perpendicular subspace to a line will be a plane perpendicular to that line passing through origin. And plane has what dimension? Plane passing through origin is a subspace of dimension 2. Yeah. So V was a line, and its perpendicular subspace is the plane which is perpendicular to that line, and that is two-dimensional. So the dimensions add up to the dimension of the space in which they live. Yeah. So this is we want to prove this fact, that the dimension of V plus dimension of V perp will be the dimension of the space in which V and V perp are living. So this is equal to dimension of Rn, which is N. Yeah, we need to prove this fact, that I take any subspace of Rn, take its perpendicular space, then there's sum of their dimension is equal to dimension of the whole space. Okay. So proof. V is a subspace of Rn. So suppose the dimension of V equal to R. Okay, it's R dimensional subspace. Okay. Now you know the Gram-Schmidt orthonormalization process. Yeah. Take dot product, and with respect to this dot product, we can, if I have a R dimensional subspace, I can find a orthonormal basis consisting of R vectors. Yeah, orthonormal basis is a basis where the vectors are unit vectors and they are mutually perpendicular. Okay. So using Gram-Schmidt orthonormalization process, use Gram-Schmidt orthonormalization process, find a basis V1, V2, VR of V. Yeah, so here is my subspace V, and then there is V perp, and inside this subspace I have a orthonormal basis of unit vectors. Okay, they are unit vectors. So they set up a coordinate system in V. These are R perpendicular directions, and they are all having unit length. So it's a way of setting up a coordinate system in this subspace. Yeah, this coordinate system could be left-handed or it could be right-handed. Yeah, that depends on how do you decide whether it is a right-handed system or left-handed coordinate system. Take the determinant of the matrix where the column vectors are V1, V2, Vr, and if that determinant is 1, it's a right-handed system. If that determinant is -1, it's a left-handed coordinate system. Yeah, so we are setting up a coordinate system. It could be left-handed, it could be right-handed, depends on the determinant or the vectors chosen. And now I look at V perpendicular. Yeah, so V perpendicular is also a subspace. V perpendicular is also a subspace, and V and V perpendicular, they live inside Rn, and you have studied this fact that if I have a set of mutually perpendicular vectors, then we can extend it, yeah, to get orthonormal basis of the whole space. Yeah, you have done that. Yeah, any set of mutually perpendicular vectors can be extended to a basis of the whole space where all the vectors are mutually perpendicular, and they can be made into unit vectors simply by dividing their length. Yeah, so this orthonormal basis of V, okay, it can be extended. This can be enlarged. This can be enlarged to an orthonormal basis say V1, V2, Vr, Vr plus 1, Vn contained in Rn. Okay. Now, where are these vectors? These vectors, where do they live? V perp. Yeah, they live inside V perp. Okay. Yeah. So Vr plus 1, Vr plus 2, Vn, they live inside V perp. Okay. Now, given any two subspaces of a vector space, I can add those two subspaces. Yeah, I can add them. So I can add V and V perp, and it will be a subspace of Rn. V plus V perp is a subspace of Rn. But it contains a basis of Rn. Yeah, V contains V1 up to Vr, and V perp contains Vr plus 1 up to Vn. So this subspace contains a basis of Rn. So what can you say about this sum? It should be whole of Rn. Yeah, it is whole of Rn. Okay. What is intersection of V and V perp? Zero vector only. Yeah, they are perpendicular to each other. The only vector which is perpendicular to itself is the zero vector. Yeah. So therefore, their sum is Rn, and so this is a definition. If V and W are subspaces of Rn, and V intersection W is the zero vector, and V plus W is Rn, then we write V direct sum W equal to Rn. Okay, this direct sum, yeah, it is saying that it is the sum is Rn. Every vector in Rn can be written as a sum of two vectors, one in V and another W, and it is a unique way of writing that, and their intersection is 0, so we put 0 above, we enclose the plus into a 0 to indicate that intersection of V and W is 0. Okay, right? So in this language, that I have a subspace and this is called complementary subspace, and this can be taken to be V perp. Yeah, this can be, W can be taken to be V perp, because V plus V perp is Rn, and there is nothing common except the zero vector in V and V perp. So Rn is a direct sum of V and its perpendicular subspace. Is that clear? Yeah. So we have a picture on the left hand side. So here is my Rn, and this is Rm, and we have a linear transformation Ta which maps vectors in Rn to A times U. And inside Rn, now I have the null space of A, okay, null space of A, and it's the row space of A. And what did we observe? This row space of A is perpendicular to the row space is the null space. Yeah. If AU equal to 0, then U is perpendicular to each and every row vector of A. That means it is in the perpendicular subspace to the row space. Okay. So the row space is perpendicular subspace of NA, and therefore these are they add up to Rn. Yeah, their direct sum is Rn. Is this clear to everyone? Yeah, there are 4 fundamental subspaces associated with the matrix, and 2 of them live inside Rn, and the other 2 live inside Rm. So the subspaces which live inside the domain space, they are the null space and its perpendicular subspace. The perpendicular subspace to the null space happens to be the row space of the matrix. Okay? Yeah? Right? So as we saw in that construction, the dimension of the null space plus the dimension of the row space will be equal to n. Dimension of null space is called the nullity of A, and the dimension of the row space is called the rank of the matrix. Yeah. So rank of A plus nullity of A is equal to n. Is that clear? That's the rank nullity theorem. Yeah. Rank nullity theorem is just a statement of this fact that these 2 subspaces, the null space and its perpendicular space, which is the row space, their direct sum is equal to Rn. Okay. It's a more descriptive way of writing the rank nullity theorem. Okay. Then we move to this point. So look at AU. Yeah. Look at the image of A, image of this linear transformation. The image of the linear transformation, it consists of vectors of this type AU, where U belongs to Rn. But think of AU, suppose I write the column vectors as A1, A2, there are n column vectors, yeah, and U has n components. This matrix product, which is a column vector, this is a linear combination of the column vectors, which is U1, A1, U2, A2 plus UN, AN. So the image consists of linear combinations of column vectors, and every linear combination of column vectors of A is in the image. So the image is really the vector subspace of Rm, which is the linear span of column vectors of the matrix. So image of Ta is called the column space of A. Column space of A. Yeah. Okay. So that is the subspace of codomain. And just like here we took the perpendicular subspace of null space, I can take the perpendicular subspace of column space also. Yeah, perpendicular subspace of column space, that is vectors which are perpendicular to every column vector of A. But column vectors of A are the row vectors of its transpose. Okay, they are the row vectors of this transpose. So this column space is nothing but the row space of its transpose. Is that clear? When you take the transpose, the columns become rows. So the linear span, this is the, so we can, just like here, we have the row space of a matrix is perpendicular to the null space of the same matrix. Yeah, this is row space of A transpose. So its perpendicular space will be what? Null space of A transpose. Yeah. So by the same reasoning, if you take null space of A transpose and take its direct sum, it is equal to this, and this is equal to the row space of A transpose and perpendicular. So these are the four fundamental subspaces of a matrix, and we will see that singular value decomposition produces orthonormal basis of all these four subspaces simultaneously. Once we factorize the matrix A as a orthogonal matrix times a diagonal matrix times another orthogonal matrix, it will produce orthonormal basis of all these four fundamental subspaces. We will see that. Okay. Okay, so recapitulate, I have this M by N rectangular matrix. This gives rise to linear transformation from Rn to Rm, and the null space of that linear transformation is the null space of this matrix. Its perpendicular space is the row space, and we saw in general that V direct sum V perpendicular subspace is the entire space. So therefore the null space and the row space, they add up to the whole space and they are perpendicular to each other. And if you go on the right hand side, the image of the linear transformation is consisting of the subspace spanned by the column vectors. All the column vectors of A live inside Rm, there are n of them, and by that same principle, okay, since column space is the row space of the transpose, its perpendicular space is the null space of A transpose, and therefore their direct sum is this whole space. Yeah, so you have to keep this picture in your mind, that in the domain there are two subspaces, the null space and its perpendicular subspace. Yeah, in the codomain also there are two subspaces, the column space, which is the image of the linear transformation induced by A, and its perpendicular space is the null space of the transpose. Okay, and what is the connection? Null space is mapped to zero vector. It collapses to the zero vector, which is the intersection of these two. Yeah, and what happens to the others? Other vectors will be therefore mapped into the column space. Yeah, all the images of all vectors under the action of A, they live inside the column space. Okay. Yeah. So if I take a vector in Rn, any vector in Rn, I can write U, because Rn is a direct sum of the null space and the row space. I can write U as a vector in the null space times a vector in the row space in a unique way, because this is a direct sum. This is a perpendicular subspace, and therefore this is a unique way of writing the vector U. And so if I apply my linear transformation, then I get A UN plus A UR. What is A UN? UN is in the null space, so AUN is 0. So this is just AUR. Okay, this is AUR. Okay, so we saw that the null space is the set of solutions to the homogeneous equations AU equal to 0, but it is saying that if I put this equal to 0, the solutions are living inside the row space. Yeah, the solutions will live, and you can take an inhomogeneous system also. If I have an inhomogeneous system, Ax equal to B, I write this x as something in the null space and something in the row space, but that is equal to AXR, and that is equal to B. This is a solution of the system of inhomogeneous system of equations. It says that the solutions live inside the row space of the matrix. Is that clear? Particular solutions are living inside the row space of the matrix. Yeah. Okay. Any questions on this? Okay, so these are the 4 fundamental subspaces. Let me now move to some remarks on orthogonal matrices. Orthogonal matrices. So suppose I have a matrix which is a square matrix of size n by n, and I can write Q as in terms of column vectors Q1, Q2, Qn. Okay, I will write superscript means column vectors and subscript means row vectors of a matrix. Yeah. Okay. So when I write superscript, I mean I am displaying the column vectors of the matrix. Okay, these are the column vectors, and suppose these column vectors Q1, Q2 and Qn constitute an orthonormal basis of Rn. Okay, I construct an orthonormal basis of Rn by starting with any basis. You apply Gram-Schmidt process that converts into an orthonormal basis, and make a matrix whose column vectors are vectors in this orthonormal basis. Yeah. Then this means that if I take dot product of ith vector with jth vector, what do I get? 0 if I is not equal to j, and it is 1 if I equal to j. Okay, so in terms of the canonical delta, I can write this as delta ij. Yeah, so these vectors have unit length and they are mutually perpendicular. Okay, now this statement, it translates into following fact. Look at Q transpose times Q. Okay, Q transpose is again an n by n matrix, and the row vectors of Q transpose are the column vectors of Q. Yeah, column vectors of Q become row vectors of Q transpose. So Q1, Q2, and then last row vector is Qn. And I am multiplying this with Q, and so I write the column vectors Q1, Qn. Yeah, how do we multiply? Take this row vector and take dot product with this column vector, I get the 1, 1 entry. Yeah, but this is Q1 dot Q1, which is 1. Yeah, then Q1 dot Q2, Q3, etc., that will be 0. So this is a diagonal matrix. Yeah, this is equal to identity matrix. This is n by n identity matrix. So if I take a orthonormal basis and make a matrix whose column vectors are the vectors in an orthonormal basis, then Q transpose Q is identity. So therefore Q transpose is the inverse of Q. Yeah, and that also implies Q times Q transpose equal to identity. Inverse you can multiply either way and it will give you identity for a square matrix. Now this statement, this says that once the column vectors are perpendicular, the row vectors are also perpendicular and they have unit length. Is that clear? If I start with some column vectors, make a matrix Q, then its row vectors will also form an orthonormal basis of Rn. Yeah, geometrically that is not obvious. It's just the algebra which is giving us this information that if column vectors constitute orthonormal basis, the row vectors of the same matrix also form a orthonormal basis. So matrices which satisfy this condition, Q transpose Q is identity, they are called orthogonal matrices. Yeah. So they are just matrices which are constructed out of orthonormal basis of Rn. So Q transpose Q equal to identity can be the defining condition. Yeah. Now they have many nice properties and they are used extensively to simplify matrices. Singular value decomposition is one such example. Okay, so if Q is orthogonal, properties, if Q1 and Q2 are orthogonal n by n matrices. Okay. So complex matrices which satisfy a similar condition, that is you take Q transpose conjugate times Q equal to identity, they are called unitary matrices. Yeah? I am assuming Q has real entries, but you can define a similar condition for complex matrices which will say Q transpose conjugation times Q is identity. So the Q transpose conjugation is called Q Hermitian. Okay, QH times Q is identity. Then these are called unitary matrices. But we will not go into unitary matrices. We focus on orthogonal matrices. So they are real square matrices. So if these are two orthogonal n by n matrices, then their product is also orthogonal. Okay. This you can prove just by using the definition. If Q is orthogonal, then so is Q inverse, because Q inverse is simply Q transpose. We saw that the inverse is also an orthogonal matrix. Yeah, and of course the identity matrix is clearly orthogonal. This is orthogonal because the column vectors as well as the row vectors, they constitute the standard basis of Rn. The standard basis of Rn is an orthonormal basis. Okay. Yeah. So how do we understand these orthogonal matrices better? What is their structure? So let's look at one by one orthogonal matrix is very easy, right? What are the one by one orthogonal matrices? If Q is one by one and orthogonal, what is Q? Or minus 1. Yeah, there are two possibilities. So it's not very interesting. Take n equal to 2. So I have a 2 by 2 matrix which is orthogonal. That means the column vectors are unit vectors and they are perpendicular to each other. So suppose my first column vector is AB and this is CD. Then what are the conditions? A square plus B square, what is that? 1, and same as C square plus D square. So that says that the column vectors are unit vectors and they are perpendicular. That means AC plus BD must be 0. Okay. Yeah. So A square plus B square is 1. That means the absolute value of A as well as absolute value of B is at most 1. If I have a real number or absolute value at most 1, I can write it as cosine of an angle theta. Yeah. So this A can be cosine theta for some theta between 0 and 2 pi, and then this B will be, B is determined. B is equal to square root of 1 minus A square. So that is sine theta. The second vector is unit vector and it is perpendicular to this. So there are two choices there. Either it can be minus sine theta cos theta, or it can be cos theta sine theta minus cos theta. Yeah. So a 2 by 2 orthogonal matrix looks like one of these two. Is that clear? Yeah. Does it remind you of some geometric operations? What does the first matrix represent? Rotation by theta in anti-clockwise direction. Okay. Think of the linear transformation of the plane from plane to plane, which takes a vector and rotates it in anti-clockwise direction by theta angle. And its matrix of that linear transformation is exactly this. This is a small exercise you must have done. What is this? What does this represent? Yeah, any guess? What does the second matrix represent? That also represents a geometric operation. This one represents a geometric operation. So to understand what does it do, you apply this on 1, 0 and 0, 1 and see what happens. So what is the image when I take this matrix? What is its image on the first standard basis vector? The first column vector. So the unit vector I is mapped to this. Yeah. Now this vector lives on the unit circle cos theta sin theta. So let's call this matrix as B, then B E1. E1 is the first basis vector of R2, standard basis vector of R2. That is this vector. This is E1 and this is E2. Where does E2 go? To the second, yeah, the second column vector. Second column vector has y coordinate. This is x coordinate. Yeah, this is the y coordinate. What is the connection between? Yeah. So y coordinate is negative. X coordinate is sin theta. E2. This is E2. Where is E2 mapped to? Somewhere here. Which quadrant? Fourth quadrant. Yeah, some fourth quadrant. This is not clear what is going on. Okay, it's not clear what is going on. Yeah, so it's a good exercise for you to show that suppose I take the line whose angle is theta over 2. Okay, take the line whose angle is theta over 2 and then think of the map which reflects vectors with respect to this mirror. This is mirror which is inclined at angle theta over 2. Yeah. So I take any vector, let us say this vector, then reflect it. So when you get reflection, it will be mapped to this vector and these two angles will be same. So any vector is mapped like this. Okay, it is reflecting with respect to this line. Think of that. Think of that transformation from R2 to R2, which is reflecting vectors with respect to this mirror, which is inclined at angle theta over 2. Its matrix is precisely this. Good exercise for you to try. Yeah. So let me not spend time on this. So show that this matrix B is the matrix of the linear transformation which sends a vector u to its reflection with respect to theta over 2 line. This is the theta over 2 line. So a 2 by 2 orthogonal matrix has geometric interpretation. Either it is representing rotation by certain angle, yeah, and or it is representing a reflection with respect to a line passing through origin. Okay. We can take, but then the matrix will change. That is the matrix when the line is inclined at angle theta over 2. So if you want the line to be inclined at pi over 4, then theta will be pi over 2. So in that matrix, put theta equal to pi over 2. In the matrix B, put theta equal to pi over 2. That is the matrix of reflection with respect to pi over 4 line. Yeah, so please do that exercise. Okay, let us think of reflections in R3 or R4, etc., and they are similar to this. So reflections in R. So first think of three-dimensional space. In a three-dimensional space, okay, we can have two-dimensional mirror passing through origin, that is a plane. Yeah, a plane passing through origin represents a subspace of what dimension? 2 dimension, right? So we have a two-dimensional subspace passing through origin, and we can take a vector which is perpendicular to this plane and reflect. Our daily mirror that we see every day is a two-dimensional subspace, right, of R3, and we are reflecting. Every day we are applying this linear transformation of reflection. We want to find a formula for this linear transformation. How do we find a formula for this linear transformation? Is that clear? The linear transformation is take a plane passing through origin and reflect vectors with respect to this plane. This is a linear transformation, and let us find out the matrix of that linear transformation. Okay, yeah. So I have this Rn I represent by R3, and I have a plane. Okay, I have a plane, and there is a vector which is perpendicular to that plane. If I give a vector non-zero vector or unit vector, then they take the one-dimensional subspace which is spanned by this single unit vector. That is a one-dimensional subspace. And we saw that its perpendicular subspace will have complementary dimension, which is dimension 2 if it is in R3, otherwise its dimension will be n minus 1. Yeah. So take the line which is spanned by this unit vector u. So u is a unit vector, and this is the line, okay, in the direction of u. So it is this one-dimensional space. This is my LU, and this plane is perpendicular to that. So perpendicular subspace we are denoting by LU perp. So we have proved that LU perp direct sum LU is equal to Rn. We have proved it for any subspace. V direct sum V perp is the whole space Rn. Yeah. So therefore, what is the dimension of LU perp? What is the dimension? N minus 1. This dimension is 1. Okay. This is line passing through origin. This is one-dimensional subspace. This is n minus 1 dimensional subspace. This is called a hyperplane. This is called a hyperplane. Hyperplane perpendicular to the vector u. So hyperplane is a subspace of Rn of dimension n minus 1, or we can say it is the perpendicular subspace to a one-dimensional subspace of Rn. Yeah, we can define it algebraically, subspace of dimension n minus 1. That is the algebraic description of a hyperplane. But geometric description is take a unit vector and take a perpendicular subspace to the linear span of that unit vector, and that is the hyperplane. Yeah. So we can talk about reflection with respect to this hyperplane. What should be the definition? So think of the map which reflects vectors with respect to this hyperplane. So we can only think of the plane in three-dimensional space passing through origin and think of a vector which is perpendicular like z-axis and the xy plane. Okay. So the linear transformation which is reflection with respect to this plane is simply take the mirror image of a vector. So if my plane is xy plane, then the vector xyz will be mapped to which vector? Xy minus z. Yeah, but my plane could be inclined. It could be inclined, yeah, with respect to the xy plane. Yeah, and that inclination is indicated by in which direction my vector u is. Okay, so the plane is perpendicular to this unit vector u, and we want to find the formula for the transformation which sends a vector to its reflection with respect to this plane. Yeah, so stretch your imagination and find a formula. Find a formula in R3 or even in R2. So in R2, I take a vector u and then take the subspace spanned by this. This is my LU, and then reflect with respect to u. So suppose I take a vector w which is perpendicular. Then what is its image? What is its image? W is mapped to minus W. And if I take a vector in this line, where is it mapped to? Itself, right? Itself. So we know the action of this linear transformation on two perpendicular vectors, u and w. Two perpendicular vectors in R2, they constitute a basis of R2. Yeah. So to specify a linear transformation, I just need to know its action on two perpendicular vectors. So u is mapped to u and w is mapped to minus w. Yeah. So this is my reflection. Reflection with respect to u maps w to minus w, and it maps u to u. Now any vector is a unique linear combination of w and u, and therefore I can determine T, and then you can write the matrix. So carry out this exercise. Is that clear? Yeah, every linear transformation has its associated matrix, right? I know its action on two perpendicular vectors, and therefore I know the linear transformation on the whole plane, because every vector in the whole plane is a linear combination of these two perpendicular vectors. Yeah, I could take this to be unit vector and this to be unit vectors, and then I have an orthonormal basis. And to determine a linear transformation, it is enough to specify its images on the orthonormal basis vectors. So these are the images. Yeah. So what are the eigenvalues of the matrix which is corresponding to T? We don't know what the matrix is, but we know the linear transformation induced by that matrix, 1 and minus 1. Yeah, it's a 2 by 2 matrix. It's a 2 by 2 matrix, so there are two eigenvalues. They could be repeated, they could be same, but in this case they are distinct, 1 and minus 1. What is the determinant of the matrix? Minus 1. Reflection corresponds to matrices of determinant minus 1. Okay, and rotation, the matrix which I wrote for rotation by angle theta, remember that was cos theta sin theta minus sin theta cos theta. What was its determinant? 1. Okay, so reflections and rotations, they differ in this number. The determinants have opposite signs. Okay, so let me give you a recipe to construct the matrix which represents reflection in n-dimensional space with respect to a hyperplane. Okay. Now I am asking you to write down a formula for the matrix in terms of the vector u. U is the only vector that is given to you. Yeah, the line is perpendicular to the vector u. Okay, so the matrix should be in terms of this unit vector u. Okay, you have seen this already yesterday in Professor Harish Pillai's lecture. So he called them as reflections or householder transformation. So let us look at the matrix H to be I minus 2 u transpose. this u lives inside Rn, and it's a column vector. Yeah, this is a column vector, and then I multiply by its transpose, u1, un. What is this? N by n matrix. This is a n by n matrix. Yeah, this is n by 1 and this is 1 by n. So this is an n by n matrix, and this is n by n identity matrix. So this is an n by n matrix. Okay, this is an n by n matrix. Yeah, tell me its action on u. So this is an n by n matrix, is give rise to a linear transformation. So where does it take u to? So this is HU. So identity maps u to u, and this matrix we multiply on the right by u. So 2u, u transpose u. What is this? U was unit vector. U transpose u, its dot product of u with itself, and u is unit vector, so its dot product with itself is 1. So this is minus 2u, and therefore it is minus u. Yeah, that's the property we desire in the reflection. So if my vector is u and I take perpendicular plane, then under reflection u will be mapped to minus u. That's what this matrix is doing. H is mapping u to minus u. Yeah. To prove that it is the matrix of reflection, what else should I prove? What should happen to vectors which are perpendicular to u? What should happen to them if I apply H? If I take a vector, say w, in the perpendicular plane to u, where will it be mapped to under the action of H? Itself, right? It should be mapped to itself. So let us test that. So let w be perpendicular to u. Yeah, w is perpendicular to u. Then let us see what H does to w. So as w will be identity applied to w, and then 2u, u transpose w. But what is this? 0. That is the dot product of u with w. So it is equal to w. Very good. All vectors in the perpendicular plane to the line passing through u are mapped to themselves, and that should happen in reflection. Vectors in the mirror, they are mapped to themselves, and u is mapped to minus u. Okay? Yeah? And that describes the whole linear transformation, because I know the action on u is mapped to minus u, and this subspace which is perpendicular to u, this is n minus 1 dimensional. I take a basis of this n minus 1 dimensional subspace, which is a hyperplane, and those basis vectors are mapped to themselves. So the action of H on any vector inside the hyperplane is that of identity, and u is mapped to minus u. So what are the eigenvalues of this matrix? What are the eigenvalues? 1 and minus 1, and 1 is repeated how many times? N minus 1 times. Yeah, and minus 1 is coming with multiplicity 1. Okay? Yeah. So let us call this hyperplane by H is the linear transformation. I call this hyperplane by, say, P. Suppose P is the hyperplane which is perpendicular to u. It's a n minus 1 dimensional subspace. I can take a orthonormal basis of this n minus 1 dimensional subspace. Yeah. The action of H on the orthonormal basis is that of identity, and u is mapped to minus u under the action of H. Okay. So therefore this matrix, the matrix H, has a basis of eigenvectors. Yeah, u is one of them, and the other eigenvectors are, take any orthonormal basis of the plane P, they will correspond to eigenvalue 1. So H has a basis of n eigenvectors, and therefore H is diagonalizable. Is that clear? H is diagonalizable. So H represents reflection with respect to the plane, which is the perpendicular subspace of the line passing through U. Okay, so this is a very important matrix, and Professor Pillai was using this yesterday to map. See, he was applying some transformation which mapped first column vector to a vector, another column vector, where the first entry is the length of that vector and the other entries were 0. Yeah, he was making it an upper triangular matrix using these transformations. Yeah, so I can take a vector and then I can find a Householder transformation which will map this vector to a vector where the first component is the length of the vector and the other components are 0. That's a good exercise for you to try, that we have lots of Householder transformations which achieve that effect. Okay, so this is called the Householder matrix. Householder matrix. And since it is corresponding to U, we write it as H of U. These are so fundamental that every orthogonal matrix is composed of reflection matrices. This is a result we will not prove. So this is called Cartan's theorem. Let Q be an n by n orthogonal matrix, then there exist U1, U2, Un unit vectors J, where J is less than or equal to n, such that Q is product of the Householder matrices corresponding to these unit vectors. Okay, so they are the building blocks. The Householder matrices are the building blocks of any orthogonal matrix. So of course you should try this exercise, that product of two Householder matrices is a Householder matrix or not. It can be. What is the determinant of the product of two Householder matrices? What is the determinant of H? What are the eigenvalues? 1 and minus 1. Determinant is product of eigenvalues. So determinant of Householder matrix is minus 1. So if I multiply two Householder matrices, do I expect to get a Householder matrix? No, because determinant becomes 1. Yeah. So when I multiply two Householder matrices, it's a orthogonal matrix of determinant 1, and orthogonal matrix of determinant 1 in the 2 by 2 case represented a rotation. So composition of two reflections is a rotation. You can prove it geometrically also in the plane. Suppose you compose two reflections with respect to two lines. Suppose I have two lines passing through origin and take reflections with respect to these two lines. Their composition will be a rotation, and you can determine the angle of the rotation. A good exercise for you to try. You know the matrices, multiply them, you will see. And then give a geometric proof also. That product of two Householder matrices, 2 by 2 Householder matrices represents a rotation, and find the angle of rotation in terms of U, the angle, the vectors corresponding to these two Householder matrices. Yeah. Let us check that it is an orthogonal matrix. HU is an orthogonal matrix. That means I should prove that this is identity. But the transpose of HU is I minus, what is the transpose of this? U transpose U, right? Transpose of U transpose is same. UU transpose is a symmetric matrix. UU transpose is itself. Yeah, it's a symmetric matrix. Yeah, 2UU transpose times I minus 2UU transpose. This is I minus 2UU transpose minus 2UU transpose plus 4UU transpose UU transpose. What is this? U transpose U. U was unit vector. U transpose U is its dot product of U with itself, that is 1. So this is UU transpose 4, this is minus 4, and this is I. So everything cancels and identity remains. That shows that the Householder matrix is a orthogonal matrix, and it's a symmetric matrix. Yeah, it's a symmetric matrix. It represents a reflection. So what do you expect when you square H? What do you expect when you take the square of H without calculation? Reflecting 2 times. If you reflect 2 times, what happens? Identity. So H square should be identity, and check, calculate and show that H square is identity. Okay. So Householder matrix is a orthogonal matrix, n by n orthogonal matrix. It is real symmetric. It has the eigenvalue 1 is repeated n times, the eigenvalue minus 1 occurs with multiplicity 1. It has a orthonormal basis of eigenvectors. It is a diagonalizable matrix because it's a real symmetric matrix. H transpose is same as H. Okay. And this theorem of Cartan says that every orthogonal matrix is a product of Householder matrices, and it is enough to take at most n of them. If it is a n by n orthogonal matrix, we can find at most n Householder matrices, so that this is true. So geometric interpretation of a orthogonal matrix is, it is a composition of several reflections. Any orthogonal matrix represents a composition of several reflections. Yeah. Okay, so enough. I want to state some facts about positive definite matrices. I have 10 minutes. Positive definite matrices. So yesterday Professor Belur talked about positive matrices. Those are matrices where entries are positive real numbers. Okay. In contrast, positive definite matrices are defined in a different way. Yeah. So this is a class of real symmetric matrices. Let A be an n by n real symmetric matrix. So for example, you can take A to be 2 by 2 matrix, where this is A, B, B, C. Yeah, this is a real symmetric matrix, 2 by 2, and suppose X is this column vector. Take X transpose AX, that is X1, X2, AB, BC, and X1, X2. Yeah, this is 2 by 2 and 2 by 1, so this is a column vector and this is a row vector. Row vector multiplied by column vector is a real number. Yeah, so calculate this and check that this is equal to AX1 square plus 2B X1 X2 plus CX2 square. It's a homogeneous polynomial in 2 variables, X1 and X2, where coefficients are A, B and C, but this occurs with 2B. So this is called a quadratic form in 2 variables. Okay, quadratic form in 2 variables. And it's a classical question in number theory and linear algebra, that what are the conditions on this matrix so that this is strictly positive. No matter which non-zero vector you pick, this will assume strictly positive value. Okay, so such matrices, real symmetric matrices, they are called positive definite. That is, X transpose AX is strictly positive for all non-zero vectors X. Okay, so let me write this definition. So A is called positive definite. Or we can say positive semi-definite if X transpose AX is positive for all non-zero X, and respectively X transpose AX is bigger than or equal to 0 for all X. Yeah. So we have a real symmetric matrix, and if it is 2 variables, I have this quadratic form. If it is n variables, I have a quadratic form in n variables. And we want to understand when that quadratic form assumes positive value. What are the conditions on this? So good exercise for you to try that this A is positive definite if and only if A is positive and determinant is positive. I'll state a general condition which will imply this, but try yourself that this condition, that this is strictly positive, is equivalent to saying that the determinant of this 1 by 1 minor is positive and the determinant of A is positive. Okay, this you can just complete the square of this quadratic form. This is quadratic, so you can try to complete the square and then check that those conditions are exactly the condition for this to be positive. Okay, so positive definiteness can be written in terms of some subdeterminants. Okay, let us see that we can characterize positive definite matrices in terms of eigenvalues also. So it's a real symmetric matrix, and real symmetric matrices, they can be diagonalized. They have a orthonormal basis of eigenvectors. Yeah, if you have n by n real symmetric matrix, then there are n eigenvectors and they form an orthonormal basis of eigenvectors of that matrix for the whole space. And positive definite matrix by assumption is a real symmetric matrix. So suppose lambda is an eigenvalue of A and X is corresponding eigenvector. That means what? AX is lambda X. Yeah. But A is positive definite. A is positive definite. This means X transpose AX should be positive for all non-zero X. Well, eigenvector is non-zero vector. Yeah. So what does this say? It says A transpose AX is lambda X, but this is equal to lambda X transpose X. What is this? X transpose X? Yeah, it's a dot product of X with itself. It's the square of length of X. It is the square of length of this non-zero vector. This is positive. If A is, so A is positive definite. A is positive definite given to me. So this is strictly positive, this is strictly positive, this is strictly positive, so lambda has to be positive. Okay, that is a better reason to call such matrices a positive definite. Eigenvalues are positive real numbers. It's a real symmetric matrix, so we know eigenvalues are all real numbers. But this is the condition which forces the eigenvalues to be positive real numbers. Yeah, every eigenvalue is a positive real number. So in particular, what is the determinant? Determinant should be non-zero because all eigenvalues are positive. So determinant is non-zero. So the matrix has to be invertible. Yeah. So a positive definite matrix has to be invertible matrix. No, it's a symmetric matrix. Real symmetric matrix, eigenvalues are real. Okay. If you take orthogonal matrix, the eigenvalues can be complex. 2 by 2 orthogonal matrix that we saw for rotation, its eigenvalues are complex and their absolute value is 1. They are sitting on the unit circle. Okay. But for real symmetric matrix, eigenvalues are real numbers, but positive definiteness implies that every eigenvalue is positive. So in particular, it's an invertible matrix. Let's show that it is a sufficient condition also. If all eigenvalues are positive of a real symmetric matrix, it is a positive definite matrix. Converse is also true. So positive definiteness can be characterized in terms of positivity of eigenvalues. Conversely, let all eigenvalues of an n by n real symmetric matrix be positive. And I want to show that X transpose AX is always positive for non-zero vectors. Okay. It's a real symmetric matrix, eigenvalues are all positive. So there is a orthonormal basis of eigenvectors. By the spectral theorem for real symmetric matrices, I have a orthonormal basis of eigenvectors. So let U1, U2, Un be an orthonormal basis of eigenvectors of A with eigenvalues, corresponding eigenvalues lambda 1, lambda 2, lambda n. So this means AUI is equal to lambda I UI for all I. So I have an orthonormal basis of eigenvectors, the corresponding eigenvalues are positive. I have a real symmetric matrix, I want to show that it is positive definite. So let X be any vector in Rn. At U1 up to Un, where is that? U1 up to Un, that is the orthonormal basis of Rn. So this X is uniquely written as a linear combination of basis vectors. So X is equal to say C1 U1 plus Cn Un, where C1 Cn they are real numbers. Because it's an orthonormal basis. Any vector in Rn is a unique linear combination of the orthonormal basis vectors. And so I can calculate X transpose AX. X transpose AX will be, what is the transpose of linear combination? It is a linear combination of the transposes. So C1 U1 transpose plus Cn Un transpose. And then A. Okay, and X is C1 U1 plus Cn U1. This is C1 U1 transpose plus Cn Un transpose, and A is acting on this vector. A is acting on this vector. So A acting on C1 U1. What is that? C1 lambda 1 U1, because U1 is eigenvector corresponding to eigenvalue lambda 1. So this is C1 lambda 1 U1. Then you get C2 lambda 2 U2 and so on, plus Cn lambda n Un. Yeah, what is this? Remember, U1, U2, Un is the orthonormal basis. I am taking transpose of this vector, pre-multiplying by transpose of this vector. It's a dot product of this vector with itself. Is it positive? Why? All lambdas are positive, and at least one Ci is non-zero. You see, X is a non-zero vector. When you have a non-zero vector, one of the Ci's must be non-zero. Yeah, other Ci's could be zero. Okay, so this is strictly positive. So positive definite matrices are those real symmetric matrices whose eigenvalues are strictly positive. Okay, it's a characterization. All right, so we learned some facts about positive definite matrices, some facts about orthogonal matrices, and we also learned the 4 fundamental subspaces corresponding to any matrix. All these things will be put together into singular value decomposition, which I will prove next time and point out applications. Okay, thank you.